Hi, folks. Thanks again for joining us. It's Kyle Brittain. I'm a freelance video journalist, former wildland firefighter, and a storm chaser. I'm also joined by Mike Flannigan, wildfire expert. And we're going to be breaking down the weather behind this next heat wave and the potential implications on the fire situation in Alberta. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to you, Mike, and we will just start breaking this down.
Great to be with you, Kyle. And the Alberta Wildfire Status Dashboard, everyone can look this up. And we've had over 420 fires this year, over 400,000 hectares burned. That's more than 5 times the area of Calgary or Edmonton. There's 80 active fires. Of those, there's 20 that are out of control, meaning fires of concern. And there was a couple of fires in northern Alberta that were growing quite rapidly, and we'll be talking about those shortly. But if you want to see what the current situation in Alberta, check out the dashboard. So this is from the GOES satellite. This is GOES 18, and that sits over the equator, turns just at the same speed as the Earth, so it's always over the same spot. And this, if you can move your cursor or mouse, you can see the gray, that's smoke. You can see it moving into northern BC, into Saskatchewan, being sucked up into that upper low in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, and it actually goes much farther than that.
And this smoke is venting out across northern Canada, right down here through Ontario, getting reports of smoke in southern Ontario. They're pretty thick in some of these kind of filaments here. Washington, D.C., Boston, even NYC along the eastern seaboard here. That smoke is starting to vent its way out eastward, right over the Atlantic. Yesterday, it was even getting sucked into a system out here near St. John's, Newfoundland. So yeah, we've been seeing that smoke traveling cross country.
You know, smoke can go right around the globe, and it does because it gets up in the upper air and just gets in the jet stream.
Yeah, for sure. We've had some rain the last week or so. This image is from May 2nd to May 9th. That's over a week period. We can see some sections here that had in excess of 10 mils, some in excess of 5. Some really they're kind of scattered convective pop-up showers and thunderstorms. If you live in the southern half of Alberta, you probably heard thunder in the last few days. But look at that, northern Alberta, just not much in the way of new precip up there. And over the last 24 hours as well, we can see more scattered precipitation. The one thing about this bullseye here is that it looks like a lot of that rain, this is in excess of 5 millimeters. It fell over top of Edson Wildfire 31. So that's good news there. I'm not sure I completely agree with this data here. It really just depends on whether the rain gauge got hit by the rainstorm or the thunderstorm. So there may have been more scattered rain than this in southern Alberta, but the most important thing here is that northern Alberta remains dry, and that's going to be what we're looking at in the next few days here. We can see here, and I'll get you to comment on this too, but you can see the impact of that rain and those cooler temperatures. This is satellite-derived wildfire activity in the last 24 hours. So as of Wednesday morning, we can see very little in the way of heat here, reflecting in central Alberta. So that means that we've been seeing reductions in wildfire activity, but in far northern Alberta there, you can see Rainbow Lake and Fox Lake were still active in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, there's some fires in Saskatchewan that were showing some activity as well. And, we'll probably talk more about this, but, so far it's been mostly Alberta on fire, some Saskatchewan, a little bit of northeastern British Columbia, but this heat event coming is going to expand that picture.
And of course, with all that pop-up convection, we've got a lot of lightning activity that's happened over the last 24 hours here. This is just 24 hours. We've been seeing quite a bit of lightning the last few days. So in southern Alberta here, this is kind of parkland, grassland regions. We're a little bit more concerned about where these lightning strikes have gotten up into the forestry areas, into like Slave Lake, Lac La Biche, Fort McMurray. We have the potential for what we call lightning holdover potential. What does that mean, Mike?
So a lightning strike, and it often hits a tree, travels down the trunk of the tree to at the base of the tree. And there's often a bed of needles if it's a conifer. And so it's kind of protected from the rain that often accompanies thunderstorms. And the lightning strike can start the organic material smoldering. But if there's a little bit of rain and conditions aren't right, it just smolders, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, and even sometimes for weeks. And then you get that hot, dry weather, and the fire wakes up. It starts flaming combustion, and then it becomes a wildfire. So just because of a lightning strike and you don't see a wildfire right away, doesn't mean it's not coming tomorrow or the next day. And with this hot, dry weather coming, we should be on the lookout for holdover fires.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about the evolution of what's coming in the coming days here. So what we're looking at is this is a forecast jet stream. This is a jet stream forecast at 200 millibars. So that's up about 12 or 13 kilometers up in the troposphere. And take a look here. This is just to give you an idea to orient yourself on the screen there. Here's British Columbia, Alaska, Siberia, Northeast Russia, Japan is over here. So you're looking at the North Pacific Ocean here, and these areas of red are maxima in the jet stream. So where the winds are the strongest through the jet stream. So we can see here, this is what we call a ridge, and we call this area here a trough. So watch what happens here as we advance in through time here. We can see this developing trough in the Gulf of Alaska, and this jet max right here on the west side of that trough. What that's actually going to do is cause this trough to dig southwards. And in response to that, we're going to get some kind of southerly flow rather, east of that trough that's going to start pushing its way northward as well. We're probably going to see a lot of precipitation, cloud formation, precipitation, whatnot. And both of these processes, the southerly wind and the condensation, are going to add heat to this system and cause this downstream ridging to build in Western Canada, to the point that we get a very, very strong upper level ridge of high pressure. And just to look at what that might look like here, just going back so this is Friday morning, as we kind of progress forwards, we can see now we're looking at 500 millibars is about the middle of the troposphere, the height anomaly. So we can see that the center of these heights is basically right over Alberta, and those reds and pinks are just showing how anomalous this is. And actually, some models we were talking about are showing higher heights even than this. This is the European ensemble, and it's showing a maximum of in excess of 591 decameters at 500 millibars. That just means that the 500 millibar pressure surface is at 5,910 meters. So this is a very deep, thick, warm air mass in Western Canada. And of course, as associated with these upper level ridges, we do have sinking air on the large scale, clear skies. And just to kind of put this into perspective, we're going to turn it over to Mike here in a second to talk about the significance of blocking. But here we can see this color scale on the bottom is it's showing sigma, or standard deviation. So you can see here in Western Canada, by Saturday, later in the day, we start to see this 4 sigma. If you look at that color table, 4 sigma upper level high, and that persists right into early Tuesday. So basically, 99.7% of all events occur within that sort of 3 sigma range. So we are way outside of normal, perhaps one in over 100 years kind of return period for this type of event. So yes, highly anomalous upper ridge. And of course, as a result of that, we get this, what we call a blocking pattern, where the upper air pattern kind of gets stagnant, and we can see kind of the development of long-term drought underneath that ridge. And perhaps, where we have these upper lows, if they're blocked there as well, you can get prolonged, precipitation. So Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit more about like the significance of blocking, how it works, and how that affects wildfire conditions?
Yeah, blocks are really important to wildfire. And, fire researchers have known for decades that that's the case. And, sometimes you hear the term omega block. It's like the Greek letter omega, the shape of the flow. Sometimes you get something called a Rex block, and this is it's kind of omega and a bit of a Rex. A Rex has a low pressure underneath the ridge. This isn't quite, the low pressure is a little bit off. But why is it important to fire? Well, blocking means it's stagnant or sits over the area for 7 to 10 days. So even if you've had rain and your fuels are wet, 7 to 10 days of dry, warm to hot weather dries out the fuels. So the fuels are receptive. All you need then is some weather, which is already hot and dry. You just need some wind and ignitions. We already have ignitions on the landscape. And if you get some lightning, and this often happens when the ridge breaks down or shifts, you get a cold front and some lightning and some wind, sometimes with rain, sometimes not. And this current situation looks like the cold front that we will eventually see looks fairly dry. So this is a classic situation, and there's a potential for a lot of fire activity. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but the potential is there.
Absolutely. And so we can see that the kind of the reflection of that. This is 5-day precipitation anomaly. You can see we're getting less precipitation than normal across much of Western Canada, unsurprisingly under that upper level ridge. And here we can see this is forecast precipitation total out to early Tuesday morning. And look at that. Nothing forecast for Northeast BC, Northern Alberta, Northwest Saskatchewan, Southern Northwest Territories. This rain here down, lots of good rain there in the northern U.S. plains. That's going to be good news for agricultural interests down there. Got a little bit more here in the next couple of days in southern Alberta. But here's the signal of that upper ridge and the very dry conditions, the stagnant ridge and that block that Mike was talking about with no rain for several days.
Yeah, this is the zone to watch out for with the no rain or some of the layer grays. That is the area of concern.
Absolutely. And here we can see also the heat anomalies. Like we were looking at the 500 millibar height anomalies, but that's going to translate at the surface here. Looks like most of that heat is actually going to be focused north of southern Alberta. It's actually cooler than average in that area where we're getting the precipitation. Where that upper high is centered, we're going to see the highest temperatures. We're talking 15 degrees Celsius above average. From throughout British Columbia, down even here in the lower mainland, out on the coast, across the northern boreal regions of Alberta, Saskatchewan, into Northwest Territories. Just incredibly high temperatures. This definitely gives us high confidence that we could be looking at record-breaking temperatures, which is, records in this region at this time of the year, high 20s, low 30s. So, I mean, we could be pushing low 30s to mid 30s, right, Mike?
Yeah, it's wow. It's going to be hot.
Absolutely. Taking a look at some of these, this is from the National Blend of Models here. Like I say, this is Calgary. We can see temperatures mid-20s peaking out there Tuesday 28. Take this as a grain of salt beyond that. But it just goes to show here, we move up to Edmonton, and we can see that the temperatures are even warmer in Edmonton, high 20s there. And I think this is going to be a little bit underdone. We could get into the 30s once again. But far northern Alberta, where we haven't had all this recent precipitation, the ground is much drier. That means that the sun's radiation can get into the ground and heat it up more directly, and you're not losing heat to processes like evaporation and whatnot. So, it looks like Sunday 32 is your high there in Fort McMurray, and high 20s at low 30s otherwise.
And I think this might be conservative. I think they might be higher than that, which is
absolutely. Yeah, and Grand Prairie too. Looking at that Sunday through Tuesday period, highs of 30. And like Mike said, this is probably conservative. This is probably underdone. We could be into the low 30s. I will talk about something that may prevent that from happening in a little bit here. But we can see, assuming things, we're talking again, this upper level ridge, air is sinking on the large scale. It's drying, it's compressing, and it's warming, right? So we have clear skies and temperatures into the 30s. And this is very high for this time of the year.
Could I add something here, Kyle?
Yeah.
Go back to the slide.
Yeah, sure.
I think that, we could get some warmer nights, which keeps the relative humidity down. Normally at night, temperatures drop, relative humidity goes up, the fire quiets down. But if it's a really warm night, the relative humidity stay low and the fire can burn through the night. We're starting to see more and more of this, fires burning through the night. And so you don't get that overnight lull in fire activity.
Totally. Yeah, you really want that recovery overnight with higher relative humidities, lower temperatures. That enables wildland fire crews to get in on the ground. It's no fun fighting fire in the middle of the night, I can tell you that, but it's that can be some of your most productive times in kind of getting some portions of these fires under control. Looking here at this is the GFS now, just the surface temperature and winds. And so as we progress into this week here, you can see that diurnal variation in the temperatures. Anytime it flashes orange or red, that's the day. And as it goes green and yellow, that's the night. We can see now this is Monday, heat just building in, kind of centered over the 60th parallel in far northern BC, Alberta, and into the southern Northwest Territories there. Again, this is kind of indicative of temperatures into the mid 30s. And we're looking at through kind of as this ridge develops, the winds at the surface are not overly strong in the far northern part of the province. It is stronger in the southern part here, the southern part of the boreal region, that is. So north central Alberta area is kind of like north of the Yellowhead, north of Edmonton, a little bit stronger winds down there. Further north, hotter, slightly lighter winds, but still certainly gusty enough. We're getting out a little bit further in the model land here, but into Tuesday night, this model is showing some convective feedback there. So it looks like some thunderstorms possible and a westerly wind shift there Tuesday into Wednesday. So again, we're going to have to see how this plays out in the coming days as we get closer to it. But this would be kind of indicative of an upper level disturbance. As this ridge starts to move off to the east, the instability begins to develop. We could be seeing the chance of not only thunderstorms and dry lightning, but the potential for pyroconvection, like pyrocumulonimbus clouds developing again, right, Mike?
Yeah, the situation's set up if the winds are light and you're going through some heavier fuels like conifer fuels, the fire gets enough energy, it's built a really strong column. You get some mid-level instability and moisture, and yeah, the setup, the potential for pyro CBs in northern Alberta is really high.
Exactly, especially following those several days of just kind of like baking and drying out those fuels across northern Alberta. So we're looking at the potential. We're going to have to, but what's going to be important is watching for those wind shifts, cold fronts, and thunderstorm activity. If we keep conditions, lighter winds. So I wanted to actually here, we're going to talk about the lightning here. So yeah, we'll just progress forward here. This is Sunday. This is into Monday. Again, because we have that upper ridge, air sinking on the large scale, you're not going to get much in the way of thunderstorm activity. We're getting into Tuesday. This is the European model now. Wednesday and into Thursday. Again, at some point out there, if this ridge breaks down and we get that instability, that rising air on the west side of the ridge, you're going to get this lightning moving across the north. And that's when things could get very interesting, very hazardous, with not only gusty winds and thunderstorm outflows that are very erratic, strong winds associated with frontal passages, but you're also getting the chance of not only those pyrocumulonimbus clouds developing, which really aids that extreme fire behavior, but you're also getting the potential for more lightning ignitions as a result of that.
So I'd also like to point out that we're seeing lightning activity, forecasted lightning activity in the Northwest Territories. Typically, May is a fairly quiet month in the Northwest Territories, but if we've learned anything, is that we cannot always rely on our history because our climate's changing. And so there is a potential for a May fire season in the Northwest Territories. So this bears watching.
Absolutely. And here, of course, what we were talking about, this is the surface wind gusts. And we can see, obviously, those wind gusts, you're going to tend to see the gustiest winds occurring later in the day. So this is Friday evening. And once you get into those blues there, it's hard to see on the color scale, but that's 36 kilometers an hour. So typically it looks like kind of peak heating. We're going to be seeing those gusts of around 40 kilometers an hour, which is, I've been saying maybe lighter winds at times, but if we do get into that 40 kilometer an hour range, that is very gusty. That's certainly going to contribute to extreme fire behavior. And moving on from there, I wanted to show this graphic here. This is a skew T diagram. It's a thermodynamic diagram showing the temperature with height through the troposphere here. And you might not be able to see these numbers, so I can tell you what they are. And first of all, this red line here is the temperature trace with height throughout the atmosphere. And this green line is the dew point trace. We have a very big space between the two. So your surface temperature here is sitting at 35 degrees. This is up near Rainbow Lake in northwestern Alberta, Monday night, perhaps in the peak of that heat. Your dew point, meanwhile, is only 3 Celsius. So that translates to a relative humidity of about 13%. So major crossover. Again, crossover is something that we use to say, like, just to kind of indicate how dry the air is. If it's 35 degrees, your temperature value is higher than the relative humidity of 13%. This is the potential for, significant fire behavior. This is really significant fire weather. We are seeing relatively light winds on this profile, so 5 to 10 knots throughout the depth of what we call here. This is the boundary layer. That's just the lower layer of the atmosphere that feels the effects of the surface of the earth. And lighter winds, perhaps some gusts with that. But like Mike was saying, if we do get some instability in the mid-levels, we can end up getting pyroconvection, deep convection, so pyrocumulonimbus clouds. This is certainly bears watching. But the one thing I was mentioning earlier that we're going to have to watch, the same location, just 12 hours later, this is the profile here. So now your temperatures drop to 16 at the surface, and we can see that it warms rapidly with height above the ground. This is what we call a nocturnal inversion. And as a result of this, air is unable to flow upward and kind of vent out through the atmosphere. It gets trapped near the surface. And winds are fairly light near the surface as well. So what we might end up seeing with this upper high, because we already have a number of fires ongoing, which will certainly be ramping up in intensity as this upper high kind of takes place in Western Canada, we could be seeing the development of a significant reservoir of low-level smoke, and obviously a big decrease in air quality over northern Alberta. So if we get that sinking air on the large scale, light winds, and lots of fire activity, you're going to be getting a significant reservoir of smoke in the low levels, and those reductions to air quality, that is likely going to spread far and wide beyond Alberta, as we're already seeing. And we're probably going to be seeing far more smoke than even this last week has been generating. This is the current, if you go to firesmoke.ca, this is a current model forecast of smoke dispersion. You can see here smoke forecast in southern Alberta, and these fires up here generating a little bit of smoke. But we would expect to see some nasty kind of dark reds and maroons as we get later into this week, as more fire activity starts to develop there, Mike.
Yeah, the only silver lining to the smoke is that it will keep temperatures down, and that does help the fire situation a bit. Lower temperatures means higher RH, but a small compensation, really.
Exactly. With that strength of an upper high, yeah, we will see. Like Mike says, it really reduces the incoming solar radiation and keeps the surface temperatures a little bit lower. It would also help kind of prevent that pyro deep convection that we were talking about from going up, thunderstorms as well. But yeah, certainly looking like it could become fairly concerning with this next heat in northern Alberta, Mike.
It certainly is concerning. Just this whole situation is, these are models, okay, and forecasts can be wrong, but I have a high degree of confidence that we are going to see this heat. And whenever we've seen this type of ridging and heat, the fires follow, and we've already got fires burning. So the potential here is significant and bears watching.
Absolutely. If you have any questions for us, feel free to leave them in the comments section. We will be following this in the coming days, perhaps creating some more content together discussing this event. So be sure to stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.